Paul Volcker is a guy who used to run the Federal Reserve. And I remember back then that he was considered right-wing. He has held on to the same exact positions and is now considered left-wing. What happened? Did anything change about Paul Volcker? No, absolutely not. What changed was the political spectrum in Washington, where a guy who had free market principles is now considered way too liberal. Okay, and he still has those same exact free market principles. I don't know why conservatives have abandoned him. Well, I do know why their leadership has, because they get paid by the banks that Paul Volcker thinks are destroying the free market. Now, that might be putting too much words in his mouth because he never said destroying. Let me tell you exactly what he did say, right? He says, look, the Volcker rule, it was his idea, which is you have to separate the proprietary trading that the banks do on their own for their own profit away from the depositors' money. Because he's in favor of the free market. He wants you to do all the gambling that you need to do as long as you've got enough money to back it up and you're not using the depositors' money. And he wants the other side of the bank protected where people put in their money and they get it back. Makes perfect sense. Everybody in the country should be in favor of it. That's why it's called the Volcker Rule. Of course, the Republican leadership says, oh, absolutely not. Why? Because the big banks make 77% of their money from proprietary trading. So they make almost all their money from that gambling they do on the other side. And they want to use your money, the depositor money, as collateral. That's what Volcker wants to prevent. He says, go gamble with your own money. So President Obama tried to put this in the reform. They called it the Volcker Rule. Well, of course, what do? They watered it down. Not just the Republicans, but also the Democrats. So what do you think of it now? Paul Volcker, he says, quote, I don't like it, but there it is. I'd write a much simpler bill. I'd love to see a 4-page bill that bans proprietary trading and makes the board and chief executive responsible for compliance, and I'd have strong regulators. If the banks didn't comply with the spirit of the bill, they'd go after them. That is not what we have. What we have is a bill that, as Senator Ted Kaufman, former senator from Delaware, explains, is riddled with what they call exemptions, and he says exemptions are, quote, pronounced loophole. So one giant loophole is, if you want to do proprietary trading, meaning your own trading, your own gambling on currencies, well, that is exempt. But currency derivatives are almost the largest market that there is in derivatives. So if you exempt the largest market, what do you have left? Well, you have a bunch of other loopholes. They say if they want to be a market maker, I should say, meaning, well, look, we're just trying to find another side to our clients. Our clients want to make that bet and there's nobody on the other side. So golly gee willikers, what could we do? We took the other side. So we're just doing this as a market maker. That loophole is so large, they can do every single trade that they do today under that exemption. And the list goes on and on. So that's why Paul Volcker says all these exemptions are ridiculous. And all it does is allow them to do the same trading. He's absolutely right. Second of all, he says that he would do far more capital requirements. He said if money market funds are going to continue providing funding for regulated banks, okay, meaning banks that are backed up with taxpayer money, FDIC insured, he says they should be subject to capital requirements, deposit insurance protection, and stronger oversight of their investments. You're going to play with depositors' money? Well, then I need to know that you have enough money. I can't have you making a $100 bet with $1 in the bank. Maybe I could let you make a $10 bet with only $1 in the bank, but I'm certainly not a $100 bet, right? But right now the banks say, no, I don't want any of that regulation, and they basically don't have that regulation because the problem has not been fixed. Paul Volcker is 100% right. And then finally he says, you have to straighten out the Fannie and Freddie nonsense, okay? And again, couldn't be more right. And conservatives who love to blame Fannie and Freddie for all the problems should totally agree, but of course they're legislative leaders, the Republicans, do not agree at all, because in reality they love Fannie and Freddie. They love that the government guarantees these crap mortgages that the banks have made. And Paul Volcker makes a point that 99.9% of Americans should agree with. Why should American taxpayers back up your mortgages? So if Bank of America, as an example, makes a mortgage, and they say, all right, we think that this is good enough to give this guy money so he can buy this house. Why are they allowed to pass it off to Fannie and Freddie so if it goes wrong, the taxpayer has to pay? And then they make money in the middle. If they're not even going to take the risk, why are they making any money? It doesn't make any sense. That's not the free market. That's buying politicians so you can make money for something you're not actually doing, and then stinging the taxpayers with a bill. Paul Volcker is just as conservative, just as pro-free market as he has ever been. And all liberals, conservatives, libertarians should, and if they knew the facts, probably would agree with him, the voters. But the leadership in both parties can't stand Paul Volcker. They're like, hush up, shush, shush. Obama nominated him as a top advisor and then didn't talk to him for months. He almost left his role as an advisor because he said, nobody's even talking to me. And finally, they said, all right, fine. Because we brought you on and we got to pretend that we're not with the banks, we'll do the Volcker rule. And look at what they did to the Volcker rule. They gutted it. So it's absolutely useless and it has loopholes that encompass about 100% of the cases that the banks want. So in the end, Obama and the Republicans give the banks exactly what they want, and they don't listen to liberals or conservatives that say stop using taxpayer money basically to keep bailing out the banks.